Hello and welcome to this podcast. My name is Jimmy Paul. I'm the director of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance Scotland, also known as WEAll Scotland. And I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Cook. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Jimmy. Hi, listeners. My name is Michael Cook. I'm CEO of Circular Communities Scotland. Been with the organisation for about 3 years, and it's great to be sharing with you today.
Yeah, likewise. I'm really delighted. And part of this podcast and the thinking around it was to just spend some time talking together because we've got so much synergy of interest. We've both become joint members of each other's organisations. And I think people listening would love to hear a bit more about Circular Communities Scotland. So I wonder if you might give that kind of high-level overview, that elevator pitch about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So, like WEAll, we're a membership body, but in a different but overlapping space. So, our members are all reuse, repair, recycling organisations, sharing, repair, basically circular economy organisations in Scotland, and all social enterprises or charities. So, we're a membership body, but our vision, our focus is for a circular economy in Scotland. But I think increasingly, the longer I'm involved in this work, I realise that to an extent the circular economy and the wellbeing economy are intrinsically linked, and it's difficult to separate them.
It's just a slightly different focus on different things within the same concept, isn't it? And it's a real joy. Like you, I think I love being a part of a membership organisation. You learn so much about people doing fantastic things across Scotland. Thank you for that. That's amazing. And I wonder if you might share a little bit, Michael, about why you got involved in this work, why this is important to you.
Sure. So I'm going to go back a little bit further than even this role, but I actually cut my teeth in financial services. I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers and Prudential, the insurance company, and I was doing challenging work, rewarding work, certainly financially rewarding work, and but sometimes at the end of the day, I wasn't really proud of what I'd done or what I'd achieved. It was maybe a result, but who was it a result for? It was often a result for shareholders, or making rich people slightly richer. And I had an early midlife crisis, I guess, in my early 30s, and I decided that actually what I wanted to do was something that I believe was really worthwhile. And I've really worked for charities since, and this is just the third in that sequence. I worked for a range of organisations before, but all of them, the organisations that I really believed in what they were doing, and I felt it was really worthwhile. And for me, that is at the heart of actually even the discussion that we're talking about well-being and circular economy. The fact that actually the economy isn't there just to generate money and make wealth. It's also, happiness isn't quite the same as wealth, and equally sustainability for the environment isn't the same as wealth. So for me personally, finding myself in a job that ticks a few boxes, one that I can use my skills that I learned in that early career and since around leadership and management and finance, accountancy and strategy and all of those things, but also at the end of the day that I thought was worth doing, and I believed would hopefully make the world a slightly better, not a slightly worse place in terms of be that for people, social reasons, and be that for the environmental care, all of that. I want to be able to go to bed at night knowing that the work I put in was worthwhile, and I believe in that.
That must have been an interesting transition from almost your old life, your old roles, into the last two roles in this one that you've taken on. What was that like?
Oh yeah, it's a big change back then, and indeed since. I mean, what I love about the roles I do, I'm always learning. Some things are the same, people, money, getting funding, there's some common elements, but equally everyone's unique as well, and every leadership position's different. But for me, it was I won't lie, I took a pay cut when I made the transition I made, but at the end of the day, a job's so much more than a salary. There's quotes out there, isn't there, about, find a job that you love and you're passionate about, and you need never work a day again in your life. I don't know, that might be an overstatement. Work is still work, isn't it? But I love the Japanese concept of ikagi. I don't know if you come across that, but something you're good at, something you can get paid for, something you're passionate about, something that the world needs. The sweet spot where those things overlap is a very fruitful place. And if I was even going in a time machine and back and talking to my 20-year self, I would encourage myself to find my Ikagi, a little bit quicker even. And certainly, if now I'm in my late 40s, I don't ever want to do a job that's not in that sweet spot again.
Absolutely. First of all, I love how you've pronounced that, because I've been pronouncing it wrong for years. I've been calling
You might be right. I might be wrong.
But yeah, I know exactly the image. I'm sure I've tweeted it a few times as well, because it really resonates with me. And I feel quite fortunate. All of the roles I've done, the studies that I've been involved in over the years, I do feel I've always felt.
How did you come to this role, Jimmy? You tell me that.
Yeah, sure. So I've always been interested in climate action, climate change. And so I chose to study human geography at Edinburgh University, Edinburgh being the birthplace of geography. And I was more interested in the impact of climate change on people. So that's the human geography kind of element. After that, I worked in the NHS on the management training scheme. So working with people, and I kept choosing roles because I was on a graduate scheme where you could choose the rotations, if you like, across the 3 years. And I kept choosing ones where there was a strong social justice element, or a strong element of getting to work directly with communities themselves and helping to enable them to have a say, putting kind of a microphone up to them so that they were heard by the bigger services and wider services around them. And I think why I was so passionate about that, winding back a bit further, and I'm really happy to share, I've shared this a few times in this job, is I grew up in harsh poverty in my early years as a youngster. I entered the care system at the age of 11, and that wasn't the best experience either. Going from kind of harsh poverty to the care system to university was a bit of a tricky one, because you feel like you don't really fit in lots of different spaces. And now I live in a slightly more middle class community, if you like, and I've got the kind of working class background. I don't quite fit in here, but I certainly don't feel working class anymore. I love how Darren McGarvey talks about this and these issues. So long story short, this job and the jobs I've done in the NHS, in the looked after children sector, and now all combine everything I'm most passionate about, which is social justice issues, environmental issues, what you were talking about ikigai, however we pronounce that, and that sense of purpose in what we do and making positive change in the world. So I'm delighted to be at WEAll Scotland, because we do all of those things. We work with businesses, as you know, we work with third sector organisations, public sector. We love community wealth building done well. We love anything that's going to lead to serious and positive change around the environment. So yeah, I feel blessed because I've got that Ikagi.
Mm-hmm. We need a listener to comment when you post this about how you actually pronounce it and resolve this difference between us, Jimmy.
Yes, absolutely.
He's right.
We should take a poll on Twitter after this, I think. But as well as that, and you'll feel similar, I'm sure, it feels like in this area, in this movement, we're pushing an open door with the, Scotland being one of the WEAll Wellbeing Economy Government Nations, 10-year economic change group that's been set up to deliver essentially a wellbeing economy. Nicola Sturgeon's TED talk on this issue. So I wonder why, if you're happy to explain a bit more, why you decided to become a member of WEAll as well. We'd be really interested to hear.
Yeah, well, we joined last year, and it was just a logical step, really. That personally and professionally, I'm committed to well-being, obviously, and wanted. I actually work a 4-day week in myself, and I really want, as an employer, we've got a strategic plan. We've got our own underlying sort of foundations to that, and one of them is team well-being. So there was that narrow element, if you see what I mean. But I think also I was increasingly speaking at conferences about the circular economy that were maybe outside. Sometimes you speak home and away when you go to conferences, don't you? Some of them are really home. It's a circular economy conference, it's a reuse or recycling conference, and some of them are away. They're social enterprise. They're broader topics of which they're wanting a focus on climate or circular economy. And a lot of the away conferences I was doing, I was sat next to someone like Catherine Trebek or yourself, and I was finding that I agree with what they say. And so the more that happens, you think, well, actually, we should we should collaborate. We should support each other. And I previously worked in an African context. I came across this proverb in Ghana, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we want to go fast, of course we do, but we also want to go far, because you're right, there's an open door, but also there's a lot of talk, and we need the walk. And the walk, we need to actually deliver behavior change, society change, economic change, and there's a lot of inertia in that space. And so what is clear to me is we can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. But maybe together we can do a lot more of it and get a lot further. So I think for that reason, it was a natural extension for us to sign up and join WEAll, and we were delighted that you returned the favour as well as a support member of ours. In that, it's not that we either need to achieve a circular economy or a wellbeing economy. I think in achieving one, we're quite likely to have achieved most of the other, because they are actually highly complementary. And they're different ways of looking at the same thing. And so that was why we joined WEAll, and it's great to be on board. And thanks for letting us in.
And likewise, well, you've given us a really nice Ghanaian proverb, and I took part in a leadership program years ago, and one of the guys there was from Kenya, and he, at the end of we were all saying goodbye to each other, shared a Kenyan proverb, which is, sticks in a bundle are hard to break. And I love that as well, because I think the more of us that are working together, identify our synergies, get to learn and be curious about the work of each other, the stronger we are as a unit. And I agree, following on from everything you said, that WEAll Scotland is all about a significant repurposing of the economy so that it's in service of people and planet, and not relentlessly extractive from people and planet. And that we've had a system for 90 years that has prioritized economic growth and confused means and ends. And actually, I love the work that you guys do, because it's all about reduce, reuse, recycle. Yes, but heavily in your strategy, which is fantastic, by the way. I went out of my way to email you, Michael, before the end of the new year to say that is a fantastic strategy, because it is superb. And you talk about the social, economic and environmental impact of what you do, and measuring those in the right ways. And it's hard not to be drawn into that when you work in this space, to really love what you're doing, what you stand for, and how you're going about it. So similarly, Michael, big fan of what you're doing and how you're going about it. And sticks in a bundle are hard to break.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I think your comment about means and ends and them being upside down at the moment, that totally resonates with me. So I think, at the traditional, we talk in terms of linear and circular economy, but in terms of the linear economy in my home patch, that is all about, it almost sees the environment as a means to economic growth, and therefore you take out, you extract resources, you mine, you farm, you whatever, you take out what you need, and at the end of the day you throw it away because it's done its job. And I think, in well-being economy terms, to stretch that metaphor a bit, in a way we can also see people as that. They are a means to an end. They are labor, and we can potentially treat them badly. They are customers, and we can potentially rip them off. But if we grow our company and our profits, then job done. So I grossly simplify there. Whereas if you flip that on its head and say that our economy, business, commerce, enterprise is there to sustain the planet, not destroy it, to live within our means, donut economic concept here, but also to help people, gross domestic happiness, well-being, whatever phrase you want to use, that actually, a job is goes a long way. A good job goes a long way to creating well-being and meeting your basic needs of, food and shelter and social, and so it flips on its head. What is a company for? What is business for? What is commerce for? And who are your stakeholders? It's not just your shareholders. So your call for a well-being economy and our call for a circular economy, that's why I think they're not in a way, we're just sort of, I put my two hands out. Our listeners can't see this, but, I'm going to start clapping. They have to come together because, at the end of the day, at the very reductionist sort of perspective, if we take care of people's well-being, but we destroy the planet, we destroy people's well-being. Equally, if we take care of the planet, but people aren't, we see this in developing parts of the world, people don't have food, they're going to go to the resources and to get their food. Basic well-being needs to be met, and it needs to be met in a sustainable way in relation to the planet. So we can't detach these concepts. They do connect and resonate, and it's all about, for me, sustainability for me has a people element and it has a planet element, and also a financial element. If you're running a company, keeping it sustainable, you don't do that by going bankrupt, of course not, but that's almost just an entry point. It's a you mustn't go below to sustain yourself. It's not the goal of everything. It's not the end. It's very much a means.
You've just beautifully articulated Kate Rayworth's donut economics and kind of the overshooting or undershooting, actually, of what we need to deliver for people to have sufficient well-being and all the factors that are comprised within that. And just at the end, there's so much I could say on that, but I will pick up on what you were saying at the end there, and the human and environmental aspects. And something we've spoken about aside from this podcast, and I wonder if we could pick up today, is about social justice and climate action, or climate justice being two sides of the same coin. And I wonder if you might say a bit about that in relation to your work, your thinking, your strategy. I would love to hear your views.
Yeah, so we actually have three values at Circular Community Scotland, and one of them is social and environmental justice. We used to have 6 values, and there was a social one and an environmental one, and then we just thought, let's reduce them a bit, but let's actually merge them, because it's hard to separate for the reasons I was just articulating. And we were pleased in our sort of mutual appreciation society sort of mode that we had Dr. Catherine Trebek come and speak at our conference, and she said a thing which I've said before, but she went further, and I loved the additional spin she put on it. So she said that the well-being and the circular economy were two sides of the same coin. I've said that a lot, but she then went further and said, and a coin is a really appropriate metaphor for what we're talking about, because actually they're two sides of the economy, and it's about money, and the current system is driven forward in that way. So so I love that, and if she doesn't mind, I'm gonna quote her and try to give credit to her for the idea, in terms of, we have an economy. The economy is always worked in particular ways, and there's been winners in that, and there's been losers in that. And the losers have often been the planet, and they've often been the economically deprived. So, and the winners have been the rich, and the rich get richer. I mean, so I guess the question is, what's the economy for? What is the purpose of it? And economic growth is a good thing, but not necessarily, not always. And it can be a bad thing, and it can be destructive if I can set up a business tomorrow that's profitable but is totally destroying the rainforest, say, or contributing massively to carbon into the environment, or exploiting people in really terrible slave-like work conditions. I think we'd all understand that is not the kind of economic growth that we want. Equally, at this end of a pandemic, with a lot of talk about recovery and a lot of talk about climate change and green recovery, well, what is the kind of growth we want? We want green jobs, we want environmentally friendly jobs that transition people out of fossil fuels, say, and into innovative green schemes that can help achieve net zero, but also jobs that deliver skills in people's lives, whereby they don't just it's not a low value job, but one that is really developing them. It's a rewarding and satisfying job, and they may be getting skills that they can put to use in another job. So one of the reasons we're passionate about the circular economy, we talk about something called the waste hierarchy. Go to our website if you want these phrases to be defined for you. There's diagrams and things showing this, but the further up the waste hierarchy you go, the better the job. The more skilled the job, the higher paying the job, but also the better the environmental impact, the lower the environmental impact, and also the number of jobs that you create. So it's estimated that for every 10,000 tons of waste that go through landfill, you maybe create about 1 job. Incineration, maybe about 6 jobs. Recycling, maybe about 36 jobs. And now wait for it, reuse, maybe 280 odd jobs. Just think about it. I'm talking to you on a computer. How much skill would it require for you to throw my computer into landfill? How much skill would it require you to break that computer down into its parts for recycling? A bit more. But how much skill would it take you to fix my broken computer and to reuse it in retail, sell it? Quite a lot more again. And which job would you rather have? And which job would maybe have ancillary services that go with it, like computer repair? You could go and service people's computers in their business. I spend all my time servicing my relatives' computers, even though I don't know that much. So there must be a job out there. So just again, that's an illustration about how we think about the resources and the circular economy. And we can see a progression that is better, but it's intrinsically linked to well-being as well. Would you rather work on a landfill site, or would you rather work in computer repair, which might pay the most? All those jobs are needed at the moment, but it's a question of how we can move the economy forward, create better jobs, create growth, economic growth, but care for planet, care for people.
It's the first time I've heard that example used, and that's really going to stick with me. It's a really fantastic one. And you started your explanation by talking about the design, the orientation of the current economy. And we know at one level, that economy is designed to achieve GDP growth at all costs. And underneath that, we have a policy system which is designed to serve that growth at all costs ethos, which influences our business goals that fall out of that, our timeframes, our profit orientation, you mentioned this too, how we treat our workers. And we talk about far too often workers, humans, people, being treated as just-in-time inventory. I've worked in a couple of roles where you had to clock in and clock out, and you had a very strict amount of time for your breaks, and it was monitored and measured. But also how we care about the environment, the quality of work that we offer. And your example just there is a really, really brilliant one. But I also, to kind of build on that as well, when we talk about social justice and climate justice being two sides of that same coin, I think also about who are those that contribute most to climate change. It is those with much more money. It is those using private jets. It is those in charge of big companies like Amazon and others. And who are those that contribute least? So we have those that live in communities where they're not consuming huge amounts, or they're not traveling huge amounts, maybe not traveling abroad, or they're not in charge of companies which are more concerned with growth, for example, than about the waste or the contribution or the impact on the environment. And then you think about the impact of droughts. There was a tornado in Barking, where I grew up in East London, which is, again, not the most wealthy part of London, just this summer. That's a really kind of more jovial example, but you think of the droughts, you think of the floods, I think of Hurricane Katrina as case in point. A hurricane hits an area, there is a delay to getting the support to that area. People struggled or couldn't evacuate because they didn't have a second home or other family out with that area to go and stay with. And that for me is one example of the social and climate justice overlap, where those who contribute most are able to get out of the path and evade the impact of what's happening, and those who contribute least are in its path. And that remains a big concern for me. I think you'll probably gather, Michael, my justice focus really drives everything I do in work. And I feel like that complements what you were saying. Yours was very kind of Scottish focused and a different angle, and mine was slightly more globally oriented, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. And I'll give a really old example, which is just look at our cities and the value of houses. The East End of most cities is poor, and the West End is mostly rich. And indeed, if you go through Glasgow on the Underground, you can almost look at life expectancy go down by a year a stop as you make a transition across the city. And that is an example of well-being, or the lack of it. But why was the East End poor and the West End rich? Pollution, prevailing wind from the west. And so, you had a lot of industry in cities, and it polluted the East End more than the West End. And the wealthier people wanted to live with clean air, and the poorer people couldn't afford it, and they got the health conditions that went with that. So there's an intrinsic link between the well-being of people and the environment, the well-being of the environment in which they live, and the, you know, one feeds the other in either a vicious or a virtuous circle. And how do we position the economy better to serve everyone's well-being, and protect our one planet?
Absolutely. And I think we've got, I said this earlier, we're pushing an open door in Scotland, but we do need to see our business leaders, our politicians, third sector organisations, public sector, really put our shoulder into this and do more. So I'm encouraged by what we've seen, but I think there's more that needs to happen. And I'm curious to hear your views on finding balance in tackling that climate change. So that balance of not pushing too much responsibility onto individuals, but also having an inspiring message about the change that we can make as individuals and the role of businesses and politicians and others. And yeah, I just wondered what your views are on finding that kind of balance of messaging and what you would like to see and say to people.
That's a tricky one, and I'll maybe be a bit controversial. We need a bit of a controversialness in a conversation like this, doesn't we? I mean, is the aim balance or is the aim action? So from a climate change point of view, I don't know whether we got the luxury to sit around seeking balance. I mean, obviously we shouldn't aim for imbalance, right? We shouldn't aim for imbalance. And there is a real issue that you point to, which is, you know, putting a guilt trip on consumers when the product's not available, for example, isn't going to get us an answer. But consumers can put pressure on companies. So maybe companies will change because of consumer pressure. So I kind of feel, personally, the way I like to look at it is whatever hat I wear, if I'm chief exec of an organization, at this organization, I should be able to drive some change because of the job I've got, the privileged position I'm in. If I'm just a parent of a child in a school, then I'm limited what I can do there, but I can do something. I'm a voter, so I can do something with that hat on. I can write to my MSP or my MSP candidate. I'm a volunteer in another organization, so again, not, you know, I can't, you know, so I'm a member of WEAll, so I can influence the wider conversation. So, you know, in all these ways, it's as my concern with the balance argument is that it results in, well, if they're not going to do what they're going to do, they need to do, why should I do what I need to do? It can become an argument for inaction. And I think climate change, if ever there was ever a problem that the world faces, we need more action, not less, and we need it faster, not slower. And so in a way, everyone needs to do what they can do and not wait for everyone else to do it. And then when they've done it, then put a spotlight on the people that aren't doing it. That's kind of the, you know, and if that's companies that are having tremendously wasteful behaviors and practices, then we need to, you know, we need to draw attention to that. We need to isolate them, stop buying from them, you know, call them to change for it. So there are some examples which I could go into where it is really hard to do the right thing for the consumer. And I mean, I'll just throw one example out there: repair products. You know, we're also a member at Circular Communities Scotland of the Right to Repair campaign. Because we recognise that it isn't enough for me to want to do the right things with my phone or my, you know, whatever, my washing machine, and make it last and repair it. If sometimes the economics don't stack up. You know, it's cheaper to replace a device than it is to get an engineer out to fix it. And sometimes, even if I'm prepared to pay a financial hit, which, you know, rational man doesn't do much, but, you know, I could care about the environment enough to take a financial hit, the part might not even be available. And therefore, you know, that option is closed, even if I was willing to pay through the teeth for it. So we really need design of circular economy products. We need products to be made to last. We need them to be repairable over their life. And we need the skills and resources to do that as well. And that would be one real example where I think, you know, you need that top-down approach. The bottom-up person can't do it all by themselves. But it is our job to put pressure on for that change to happen, so that the solution follows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, love your examples that you use, and bring a slightly different lens to it as well. I think I'm the same as you. I agree with you, and I use the phrase kind of, we need to embody the change we want to see in the world. So we have a responsibility to do our investigation, do our research, vote a certain way, eat a certain way. But I'm also really conscious that when I was living in, harsh poverty or not long out the care system or whatever, I was thinking about survival for the next week or 2 weeks. And I didn't really have the means to eat a certain way or eat local produce. Didn't really have the headspace to do that. So I think I kind of bring that other kind of, I don't know how to explain it, just that word of caution. I think we do have a responsibility as people to set an example in what we do, but also acknowledging that people are doing their very best within their situations. However, I love what you were saying about shining a spotlight on those that are not taking the right action, despite all the evidence that we have that we should be doing that, or despite the fact alternatives exist in the way we produce, in the way we reduce, reuse, or recycle, or not.
I totally agree with you there, that when it comes to, if you haven't got a roof over your head, for example, or food on the table, climate change is hard to be addressing. And I totally take that point. And I think there is a really useful, within the comment that everyone needs to do what they can do, I think it falls to the people with power and with influence and with wealth to lead on that. It's a bit like when we think about discrimination, be it sexism or racism or homophobia or something, the people with power and historic privilege need to be willing to give some of that, to stand back. I'm a white middle class man, and I'm often invited to speak at conferences, and I've started asking, do you have balance in the panel? Because if everyone looks like me, that's not healthy, that's not right, and it's not enough maybe for someone from a previously underrepresented background to force their way in. So I think in climate, I also need to ask that question. Has my voice been more than enough heard? Should I shut up for once instead of just articulating my perspective, like I always do? And I think it's similar with climate change, that the people that have, you were quite right about, the people that have predominantly caused the problem are the wealthy. I mean, if you Google champagne flute climate change or something like that, you'll see a graph that shows the shape that basically, the classic sort of 10% of the world's richest have caused 50% of the problem, and the poorest 50% have caused 10% of the problem, broadly speaking. And that therefore, for us to put pressure on the economically disadvantaged to fix this problem is a complete dereliction of our nonsense. It's just not the answer. We need to lead, give up some of the privilege and the maybe the foreign holiday or whatever, but being the classic example of that. But I do think, yes, there is a need for balance across economic divides, for sure. Good point.
The late economist Manfred Max Neef, who Catherine Trebek often quotes, he talks about fundamental human needs and the dignity and connectedness and physical health and shelter, a sense of purpose and meaning, and all of these things are actually fundamental to all of us. And when you talk to people and communities all across Scotland, all across the world, it often boils down to those same themes. And that is what a wellbeing economy is in service of delivering. It's those things rather than growth or cost or damage to the environment to serve growth, and relationships and shelter and sufficiency of income, ability to participate in society. And that's a reminder of what makes us innately human and our commonalities. And I think if there are people from communities who are living in really dire, difficult situations just now listening to this podcast, it would be that is the fundamental purpose of a wellbeing economy. And you can't have a wellbeing economy without gender justice or without racial justice, without completely revamping the society that we live in and thinking about, wellbeing economy is about pre-distribution, it's about prevention, it's about making sure that harm doesn't happen in the first place and that we need to fix it further down the line through taxation. And I love the work that Catherine Trebek's done on things like the human economic cost model at the Independent Care Review, for example, which shows how much money we waste serving and fixing the issues in the care system, that if we invested further upstream in homelessness and issues around poverty and substance abuse and things like that, actually even further upstream than that, and making sure that jobs paid well and communities were safe to live in, we would save so much money as a nation, and that would be in service of the wellbeing economy. So, Michael, from your perspective, is there any call to action you'd like to give to our listeners?
Oh, great! Fairly new year, isn't it? So I wonder what. I don't want to pitch unachievable New Year's resolutions, but let's go with a few things I think people can do in this space that can really help. Think about what you're purchasing. Do you need it? I go hill walking, and the lightest things I carry are the things I leave behind. They don't weigh anything, it's the same. The product with the least environmental impact is one you don't buy. So we need to have responsible consumption, not just shop for therapy. So do you need that thing? I think another thing would be, can you make your products last longer? Can you, if something's broken, can you get it fixed? If do you need the shiniest, latest model, or can you make that phone last another year? If you are done with something, don't just throw it away. Can it go to someone where they can use it? Ideally for its original purpose. A laptop makes a good laptop better than a plant pot. So let's try to keep products being for their highest value use. Obviously recycle. Separate your recycling. A lot of people think they can just throw anything in the recycling, dirty pizza boxes and things. You can't. So try to make your council workers' life easier by putting things in the right recycling bin. That's an obvious thing we can do. Sharing products. Research has been done that suggests the average household drill is used 13 minutes in its life. I'm pretty rubbish at DIY, so it's probably even less than that in my house. So do we all need to buy a drill? What we actually need is a hole in the wall, and we can maybe borrow the drill. So check out your local sharing library. And similarly, check out your repair cafes for getting products repaired and fixed, and learn the skills yourself. And just on that point, and one sort of higher bar value call to action for people that they might be interested in is we've got some funding recently from Scottish Government for a network of sharing cafes and sharing libraries and repair cafes. And there may be people listening to this that might want to be the solution to their own problem and start one, and start a sharing library in their community, start a repair cafe. So if that's the case, go to our website and get in touch. And maybe that's the last call to action as well. Go just visit our website, check out what we're about. It'd be great to hear from you. If you're in this space, we'd love anyone doing any of these activities, reuse, repair, recycling, to obviously join us as well. So loads of potential calls to action depending on who it is that's listening.
Yeah, love them all. Thank you. And as ever, my call to action from WEAL's perspective would be, you're welcome to join as a citizen. If you're an individual, you're welcome to join as an ally, a member, if you are an organisation. And we will do two things. We will help you to understand what difference you can play as an individual or as an organisation, but also we will be that collective voice for that wider systems change. And that's partly why, Michael, it's been really nice to record this podcast with you, because this is a consolidation of our partnership, the start of a partnership, which I'm sure will grow in influence and the change that we affect. So thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. And it's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, ditto, really enjoyed it. And I hope 2022 is a great year for WEAll. And well done for all the work you do, Jimmy.
Thank you. And likewise, Michael. Cheers.